Hi, and welcome to our demo on the Tracera product suite. So today I'm going to walk you through a demo of all of our products that we have. And so we can give you first an overview. There are 4 modules that I want to show you today. The first module is going to be our compliance module, which is focused on ensuring that you can easily report on frameworks such as CSRD, CDP, GRI, and then add in also other custom frameworks that you may need to report back to your portfolio owners or to other stakeholders. Then you have your greenhouse gas emission suite, which is related to scopes 1, 2, and 3 footprints. And we'll show you how we leverage the power of AI to make your lives easier when you're trying to calculate your emissions. The final module that I want to show you today is the supplier engagement module. So once you have your internal operations in order and you're collecting the data you need within your own teams, then you need to look outwards onto your value chain in terms of how you can better engage your suppliers in terms of both emissions calculations as well as due diligence purposes. So I'll show you a demo of our supplier portal that will do exactly that. All right, so let's dive in. I'm going to share my screen. Great. Awesome. So in this main homepage here, you'll see various frameworks such as CSRD, EU taxonomy, GRI, the CDP framework. I'll give you a sneak peek at another platform actually that will show many other frameworks, including the California framework, as well as IFRS, etc. So whatever framework you need, we will have available on the platform. And if there's anything that you feel like is missing, give us a shout and then we'll figure out a way to add that into the platform as well. And as I'm going through this demo, please drop your questions into the chat. We have someone monitoring the chat, so you can pop it into the tool here in the messages or in the Q&A section later as well. But I'll try to adjust the questions as they come in throughout the session. Great. So let's take a look at one of these frameworks to see what it looks like. So if I go into the CSRD card, you will be able to see all the different topics you need to report on. And think of this as almost like your progress management tool. So across all of your questions, you'll be able to see this many questions are in progress, this many questions we haven't started yet, etc. And this, you'll also see that there's a flag for things that, oh, if let's say you want to go back and look at this question, there's a flag there. You also have tasks. So if you're collaborating with other users on the platform, you can have them enact on different things through the tasks. CSRD has a lot of questions, right? Like across environmental, social, governance. So a lot of people on our client side ask questions around, okay, like I only want my reporting individuals to only see questions related to the things that they're responsible for. So that's how we have this idea of reporters. So I'm going to share a different environment now to show you how that looks. So let's say here, we again have the CSRD framework. And now I'm going to go into framework settings. In framework settings, you can set a number of parameters such as what your fiscal year is, which countries you operate in, which legal entities you're part of, which regions you are part of, and then also the reporting deadline. These values here ensure that when we're creating tables for CSRD, we create tables for the countries that you have in operation so that you can add in the values for each of those countries. But then we also have here our reporters section. If I navigate to reporters, you'll be able to assign and remove our reporters by question. So let's say I'm in general and I'm looking at these topics related to, let's say, the role of the administrative management and supervisory bodies. I can click into here, and maybe these questions I want the legal team to answer or the compliance team to answer. And then I can assign users. So I can assign either data providers or data reviewers. And we worked with auditors to ensure that we have the right level of permissioning in our platform. But I can assign a data provider to this question. And you will be able to assign myself to this, assign data provider. And now for this question, we'll give it a second to load. This data provider will only be able to see the questions that are marked in here. So we'll refresh the page. Speaking of roles, we also have, so we have a data provider, we have the data reviewer, and then we also have the auditor as a role in our platform. And then lastly, you have your module admins. So the admins can do whatever you need on the platform, but then the data providers, so now that I go into this particular question, only will load, wait for it to load. So Amy will only be able to see these questions. So that's how you can ensure collaboration on our platform. Now I'm going to show you now a neat AI feature that we have. So what we think of AI, we think of AI in terms of both quantitative AI and qualitative AI. So what do I mean by that? Qualitative AI, CSRD as well as GRI, California regulations, all of these platforms have a ton of narrative questions where you have to report on your strategy or your policies or your code of conduct, etc. I'm assuming that as a organization that has worked on sustainability for a few years now, you already have some of these documents in your back pocket. So you probably, or you may already have a sustainability report that you've written. You could have already an employee code of conduct. You could have a waste management policy, whistleblower policy, supplier code of conduct, whatever you're thinking of. You can have multiple documents available. And think of this as what your own personal ChatGPT is going to be embedded with. So when you're using our platform, these are the documents that the AI will be trained on. And when you go to a specific question, and I'm going to do this with you live, let's say we go to governance, we go into business conduct policies. It's going to first ask you whether you've adopted policies. And if you have adopted policies, let's say for this question, I'm going to run AI suggestions. Now I'm going to run it on 5 documents, and it's essentially going to read through these 5 documents. How can I see how this is working? I'll be able to see that by going into the jobs page here. And we'll see the search reference doc job. And see that it's pending. So this is a new job that I just started at 10:08 EST, and it's currently processing. It takes about a minute or 2 per question. And if you need, we can also run all of CSRD questions for you at once. And this could be kind of like your gap assessment to see whether you have answers to, whether you have supporting documents to all your questions or not. So you see that it processed. You saw how long it took. It took, I think, less than a minute in that case. And now I'm going to go to the document section again for the question. And then down here, if I refresh the page, you'll see the AI suggestions. These document names look a little funky, but essentially it's the documents that it found suggested answers for. So here it's saying on page 10, there is information about risk management that could be applicable to this question. I'm going to take a look at this other document, which is related to whistleblower policy. And then lastly, in this document, you have your corporate services waste management. So what you can do is you can read through this and say, oh, does this answer support actually my my response that I need. You can mark this as referenced. If you mark it as reference, then this pending status here for the AI is going to switch to have being accepted. And then here you will have available a supporting document. So now you have a supporting document for this particular question. I've run this in a few more cases in our platform so that we're not waiting around waiting for this to load. I'm going to show you a few more examples. Oh. So the use case for this is really helpful where we see clients upload 30 to 40 documents at once. And essentially they're having the AI do a gap assessment to figure out, oh, like what's missing and what do we have today that can be helpful as a supporting evidence. And another thing that's exciting that's coming down the pipeline is we're not only using AI to give suggested answers, but we're also using it to actually start writing some of these answers for you. I will show you an example of that as a sneak peek as well. I'll give you a second. So here, now let's see it in action in terms of how you would actually use this. So now I'm on our demo environment where I have more answers selected. I have here this particular question. And another exciting thing is you'll be able to see when you're working on this year's answer, what your last year's answer was. And so I can see, oh, in CSRD for 2025, this is how I answered the question. And then these are my documents that I can refer to. And here, this document I already have loaded. And you can see this one I've rejected as a good reference. But then there's other examples in here that you can refer to. And maybe this one I like better as supporting evidence. So right now we're focused on identifying the source. What are the supporting evidences that you can use in your response writing process? The future, though, is actually in response writing. So this is an example of some AI research that we're doing, where these are the CSRD questions, and we're reading through reports from Siemens, ABB, so kind of publicly available CSRD reports to see whether we're able to write out the answers ourselves. And you'll see here that for percentage of remuneration, we see that Siemens has 20% of their compensation related to this. And they're looking at, and the AI is looking at 3 different page numbers in order to write out this response. For ABB, you have this as well. But for Schneider, they said that they don't actually provide the percentage of remuneration in the report. And that's a good way to be like, oh, this is what our competitors are doing. So as you're thinking of writing your responses, we're helping you get to your first year's response quickly, but then our future vision is that we're going to help you do better at these responses from benchmarking as well as through other AI solutions. Great. So we have some questions around the data collection and the auditor, so we'll go through those as well. So in terms of the auditor's role, they're going to be checking for a few things. One is they're going to make sure that the measurement has gone through our review process. So in here, we have the under review news review, and the auditor has view access to everything, but not on edit access. And so they'll be able to see that you have a supporting document here. They can refer to the supporting document in reviewing the information. There's also an audit log on the side, which the auditors can refer to in terms of, oh, these are the changes that are worthwhile for them to review. In terms of data collection, we've talked about the narrative-based information. And when you're working with other users, you can also collaborate with them with tasks and messaging. And so here you'll see our task page where you can have assignees, approvers. So in addition to assigning reporters to questions, you can also use our tasks feature. You also have messages, which is very similar to, if you use Slack or Microsoft Teams for your conversations. Instead of having conversations in Teams about business conduct policies, you can instead capture it here instead, so that all of your communications related to these reporting topics will be in one place. And this really helps in future years too. So let's say you have another person in this role. You can be like, oh, look at this message history, and you'll be able to see exactly who should be responsible for this reporting question. Now let's talk more about the quantitative data points, which, as you know, can be very frustrating and manual. So when I'm looking at the social data points, let's say I'm looking at the characteristics of the undertaking's employees. Our platform comes preloaded with the tables that CSRD or CDP or GRI needs. So instead of having to create these tables by looking at the requirements, you can just come into our platform and know that you have to report on your employees by male, female, other, not reported. So that's one time saving. The other time saving is instead of adding in data in the UI, which you can do so very easily, but you can also upload spreadsheet-based data if you have those, or you can actually set up an integration with your HR systems. So let's say that you already have a great HR system where you check all this information, then you can set up an API or an SFTP-based connection and have that data flow in once a month, once a quarter, once a year, whatever cadence makes sense. Okay. Then lastly, in the guidance section, this is something that we're working to improve, but we have information about the specific legislation that this question is coming from. And then also in some cases, we have some sample answers written out. So let's go into the transition plan example. I have in the guidance section. Examples of how you should answer this question. So if you need a head start getting started on these responses, then you can refer to our guidance section as well. Okay, let me just double check our Q&A section. Awesome. Okay, so now we've talked about a few things already. So we talked about the narrative-based questions and how AI can support you in that process by giving you sample suggestions. So here again, you have AI examples that's supporting you in answering this question. Let's see what this was. This was a suggestion from, this is the CDP response. So for CDP, you talked about your transition plan already, emissions target. So it's saying that you should look through this document to answer this question. So you have that and how we're going to be using that to help you draft responses in the future. Then we looked at quantitative data points, such as social data points. And now we're going to move over to the greenhouse gas emissions data points. So if I look at climate change, and I'm looking at metrics and targets, you have your gross scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And this you need to report on in this particular table format of all of your emissions, what your base year is, and what your values are. This can be an overwhelming data collection task, and that's where we also have AI to support you in the process. So now I'm going to navigate to our Scopes 1 and 2 tool, and you can do so by clicking on this in the navigation icon. And before we jump in, I'm seeing a few more questions come in, so I'm just going to take a look at that. Great. Okay, so we had a question around the updated ESRS data points planning to be in the software. So we actually do have the VSME, which is like the version small, medium enterprise framework, planning to be going live in the next week or so. So that's going to be available very soon for the users who need it. It typically takes us about, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks to update any legislation or any new framework. So that's kind of the benchmark timing I would use in terms of, oh, like this is what I need as a new framework. We also had a question around cross-framework sharing. So when you're working on these frameworks, I know that many of you work on both CDP and CSRD, or you work on both CDP and GRI. And in many cases, those questions are similar or shared. So one of the features we have in the pipeline is being able to work on, when you work on a GRI question around like your reporting boundary, for example, then it will automatically say, hey, this is what you answered in CDP. Do you want to use that answer? That's something that you can use qualitative automation, this feature that I just demoed, but it's also something that we're going to improve in the future. Thank you for all your questions. All right. So yes, so now I'm in our Scopes 1 and 2 tool. The Scopes 1 and 2 tool, think of it as your site-based data collection tool. So within Scopes 1 and 2, I'm going to first go into site management. You will be able to add in all of your sites here. I want to actually call out that this you won't do on your own. Our onboarding team will be the one setting up the platform so that day one, when you receive the platform, when it's ready to use, it will actually be preloaded with your site information. In addition, for each site, we're going to be adding in information about the country, the region that it operates in, but also we have your utility provider information here. And that's something that, again, we will be populating into your platform based on historical data. So when we start onboarding you onto the platform, there are a few things we're going to ask of you. One is we would want your site list. Two is for each of those sites, we'd ask whether we can have access to your historical bills. If those historical bills are within your accounting system somewhere, or it's in either of your site manager's local inboxes, we'll figure out a way to help you get that data and make that process as smooth as possible. But the reason why we need your historical bills is because we want to set up for each site, oh, this site has electricity, and that electricity's account number is this, meter number is this, and it's being provided by this particular utility provider. If I going into adding new utility providers, you can take a look at the different range of utilities today. There's so many, and we're confident we cover most of your needs. But if there's anything that's missing, we can add those. Let's say I'm just going to add in a test site. And I know that this data is going to come from a PDF file of the bill. I'll set a start date of when this particular utility provider became live. And then for now, I'll set the end date as super far in the future. This is a monthly bill, and the consumption unit, let's say it's coming in liters of LP gas. The currency is in USD, and this is a scope 1 emission. If I hit add, then you'll see that gets added into the platform easily. You'll also see in here data providers. So data providers are, let's say that you have a business model where you're asking each of your site managers to provide you this information. I guess this is an open question, like how I'm very curious to understand like how you do your data collection today in terms of whether you get that information automatically integrated from your ERP systems or if you have each of your site managers giving you this information. Either way, we can work with you, but if you have the model in which your site managers are providing you information, you'll be adding them to this particular site as a data provider. And so you can go in here, add data providers, and then right now I have no other users on the platform because it's the demo platform, but this is where you'll be able to add in your users. You'll also see in here this concept of parameter-based estimations. I know for a lot of you, the data doesn't exist at each of the sites, or it's hard for you to collect the data. So if you wanted to create estimations based on the square meters or square footage or head count of the people in that site, then you can also do so automatically from our platform as well. One final thing to call out in our site management page is the fact that we also have renewable energy purchases. So let's say that you are working on your sustainability initiatives, and for the country Austria, you purchase renewable energies. Let's say you're purchasing 1,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy, and those you know have a zero emission factor, and you're purchasing it for the year 2023. Then you can add that into the platform. And when I hit next, it's gonna give me an error because I don't have any sites in Austria. So I'm gonna actually show it to you in a site where I know I have data. Let me stop sharing and I'll pull that up. I guess while I do this, I would love to hear from the group. Like, do you have any renewable energy type initiatives on your sites today? Do you have renewable energy purchases, or let's say RECs or guarantee of origins? Or do you have renewable energy on site where you're actually using a solar farm? Those are typical cases that we see in our customers, and we're always looking to make sure that they are capturing all of those benefits on our platform as well. So maybe would love to ask the group if they want to put in the chat any types of renewable energy initiatives that they're doing. But as I mentioned, renewable energy purchases is one of them. So let's say that I'm here and I have purchased renewable energy for UK. See this site here. What it will do is it will check to see these are all your sites that you have in UK. And maybe you only want to put the renewable energy, like 1% of that into this particular site, and the remaining percentages you want to distribute to other locations. You can manage that here as well. All right. So now let's go to the fun AI part of this again. So in the document uploads page, this is where a user will go and upload their utility information. So I'm going to go into this upload PDF button here. And I'm going to go to my demo files and add in a bill. You'll see that it gets uploaded into the platform and it gets added in as a grayed out row. So similar to the AI feature for qualitative automation, you'll see that this takes about a minute, 90 seconds to process. And so while it processes, you can add in many more at a time. So you can do a bulk upload and take a look at the results later. So while this processes, I'm going to show you a few fields here. So first, you'll see that there are certain things that are in warning state and certain things that are emissions included. We also have this concept of signing off and locking the bills. So warnings, what are some warnings? Let's take a look at this one. This is a warning because you're missing fields. This bill, you'll see, is a pretty complex bill. We call these multi-entry bills because you have sewer, water, and gas all in the same bill. And for natural gas, it's actually giving you a warning because it's saying that I don't have any consumption value. But that's because if you look at this bill, I'm going to zoom in on this because it's a little small. In this last row for gas, you'll actually see that it didn't have any consumption. So it's able to accurately flag that this is missing. And then all you have to do as a user is go in here and then confirm that the usage is 0. And then, oh, my screen sharing is getting in the way. And I can hit confirm data and hit save changes. And now the benefit of this is that here in comments, it will actually show you that I changed the usage from none to 0 and that the bill went from incomplete data to cleaned. And so all of the actions in the platform, as I mentioned earlier, are tracked and available for auditors to view or for managers to view later on. So now let's look at this bill. So you'll see that while we were looking at that bill, it has already extracted, the AI has extracted 100% of the information, but there's a potential error. Why? Because the cost and the consumption is way less than the last bill. So let's take a look. You'll see here that this is the invoice data, and you'll see the warning messages here saying that you have a verification that failed for month-over-month differences. The threshold you can set at whatever your threshold you want. You can set it at 20% or 50% or 100%. But this is a check for two things. One is it checks for AI accuracy, just to make sure that it's doing a good job. The second thing that this checks for is it ensures that if there's any sudden sways in your usage, then then there's a check and balances of like the utilities that you're using in the platform and your sites. And I can actually click on this. This is going to open up the previous bill. So this bill we were just looking at was a bill from May, right? Now this bill that I'm looking at is a bill from June. And so you can see, sorry, no, this bill is a bill from, yeah, May, and then this bill is a bill from April. This is the April bill. This was a May bill. And the usage was 480 for the May bill. And then for the April bill, the usage was 1280. So it is a big decrease in usage. And that's why the AI is flagging it. So you can just confirm data saying, no, it's still good. You're good to go. And that's all the data provider will need to do. So no more manually putting in the usage values. You can instead have AI extract out the values, and then all you're doing is confirming the information. All right, I think we had another question come in, so let me just double check. Great. All right, so in terms of logging activities, yep, so I just wanted to show you how this is something where I manually mark the document as being confirmed. So this is where you can see that information. But let's say that I also wanted to change something here. So for example, for cost, I'm pulling the total current charges here. But let's say I wanted to pull the total amount due instead, or I wanted to pull the pre-tax cost. Then what you would do is first you would change it here, and you would save changes. This value that you've saved is now going to be available here in the comments. So you'll see that I changed the cost from this value to this value. The second thing you would do is you would actually flag this to your customer success manager, saying, hey, like the AI is pulling the total current charges, but I prefer that it pulls this total amount due instead. Or I prefer that it pull the pre-tax cost instead, and then have the AI reflect that in its learnings as well. Okay. Well, we took a look at some electricity bills, and we also took a look at some gas bills. Maybe let's take a look at what the final output of all of this looks like. So if I go into our summary page, you'll be able to see your scope 1 emissions, and then let's change to a different year. Your scope 2 emissions for location-based, for market-based, and you can see also the details greenhouse gas breakdown of the items that you need. Another thing to note is your intensity metrics. So let's say that you want to report on greenhouse gas emissions intensity based on production volume or your company's revenue or the square footage of your sites. Those are informations you can add in here. If I go into the location-based tab, you will see all of the data available here. And what I can do is, let's say I want to group by, I think in this case, we only have one site, but I'll go to a different year. So let's say here, I want to group by site. Then it will group it by site, and you'll be able to see the different emissions information by site. And if I wanted to still see the detailed information, then I can go here, and you'll be able to see that there's actually 3 different sources, all related to Midwest Energy, but they're probably different account numbers. And you'll be able to see the different usages for those, the cost, the renewable usage amount, the non-renewable usage amount, the emissions, and all of this you can also export out to CSV. And so if you prefer to do your analysis in Excel, then that information will be readily available here as well. Obviously, all of this information needs to beautifully come together in a dashboard. The types of dashboard that we have, one is we have variance dashboards. Those are not as interesting. We'll show you the date range dashboards. So demo environment, again, doesn't have a ton of data, so I'm going to navigate towards testing. So in testing, you'll see the dashboards broken down for the total amounts. Then you'll have it broken down by scopes 1, scope 2. You'll see it broken down by utility types, by the different business units, by site, by region, by country, by site. Also, you can also see which ones are estimated versus not. So the difference between the primary data and the secondary data splits. So all of these dashboards can show you where you are in your data collection and see whether there's any sudden spikes or progress. One thing on our roadmap for this year is actually target setting. So here, based on these charts, you'll be able to also draw a line in terms of a target of how you want your emissions to progress and make sure that you're tracking against them. All right, I have one more question in the Q&A, so let me take a look. Perfect. Yep, so the question was around dashboards, so just you're reading my mind. This is where the dashboards are in terms of being able to present to your clients. And you can see the dashboards according to the emissions, so both location and market-based emissions. You can also see it based on your consumption, as well as the financial values. For the Scopes 1 and 2 tool, as you may know, the audit process is quite picky. And so that's why we have a lot of tools in our platform specific to help you with that audit process. Here is our emission factor table, where you'll see all the different utility emission factors for the different regions, the GWP multiplier used, the CO2 equivalent emission factor, each of the greenhouse gases were available, which one is the source, when was the source updated, when did we access it, as well as the source link. The really cool thing is the emission factors by site. So here I can actually see for the specific sites, let's say I'm looking at the production fast edited 2 site. You can see for each of these sites, all these emissions for these utilities that are being used in this site, I can see the emission factor. So when you're going through an audit, the auditor is going to check for a few things, but they're essentially going to say, hey, for this site, for electricity, you're telling me that the emissions was this amount. Then they're going to want to go find the bill. So you'll go in here, they'll go look at this bill. Here. They'll look at this bill and they'll say, oh, okay, so for this bill, this is the emission factor that you're using. And so we give this information here as well as in the tables so that you can easily have the auditors double check that information. Let's say you don't know where the bill is and you want to search for it. Then you can go into bill entries here. This is where all of your information will load. And this is where you can actually search for particular bills based on various information. So let's say I'm going to filter for a site. Okay, let's say I'm filtering for Mexico. So now all of the Mexico related information will show up here. Let's go back to Portco, which we had. All of the Portco information is here. So this is also, again, a glorified Excel in terms of being able to manage all of your information easily. The final piece to this is around approvals. So I'm going to go into documents and then go into approvals. Approvals are a way for you to lock down data. So let's say that you're going through an audit or you are finished with your sustainability reporting. I'm sure you've had this pain point before where you're like, the numbers keep changing. I don't know why. Someone's making changes in the platform. Our sign off and locking feature enables you to essentially lock a site and you can see what the usage and the emissions were at that point of locking. And these numbers will no longer change unless someone comes in and explicitly undoes the sign off. Then you can start editing the information again. Right. Okay, just gonna double check the Q&A site. Great question. So we received more of a general question around the types of companies using our software and the typical size. So maybe I can do that by going into the site management section here. So the site management, as I mentioned earlier, is where you will list out all of your active manufacturing sites or offices or whatever you need. We typically see around a range of 20 sites to 5,000 sites. So the range of companies on our platform is pretty big. I would say a sweet spot of our customers is when you have around 100 sites around that area, because that's when it starts becoming really, really hard to manage in Excel. But that said, like even for the companies that only have 20 sites on our platform, they need it because when they're going through the audit process, their auditors are going to be like, oh, for this site, where's the bill for March? And instead of having them go through SharePoint or like go to their data provider and find that information, they can easily find it on our platform. So that's been a super big value add for them. In terms of the companies, I'd say most of the companies are in our manufacturing space or in the real estate space, as well as some services companies. And then the typical revenue are those that qualify for the CSRD Wave 2, or for those that are super, I guess, forward-looking in terms of including CDP or GRI or MSCI ratings into their investor reports, because those have a big impact on their ratings or they have a big impact on their investor perception. Great. So in the remaining time, we're going to go quickly into scope 3, as well as look at the supplier side of the house. So once you have your own emissions set through our scopes 1 and 2 platform, then you want to start looking at your value chain emissions. I'm going to X out some of these sites. So from our demo Bain platform again, now I'm going to go to our scope 3 emissions. So scope 3 emissions, as I'm sure you're aware, is broken down into 15 different categories. We're capable of handling all of those categories, either through Excel data uploads or integrations with your purchasing system or integrations with your logistics provider or through your waste data. Whatever you need, we'll be able to accommodate in our service, in our platform. But let's say we're looking at category 1, which is typically the one that our users struggle with the most, given the breadth of data that it requires. The data that we will need from you is the following. We want to know how much you're purchasing to start off with, so we can develop general assumptions or general estimations around your scope 3 emissions. So for each of these products, we're going to have in here the description of these items and either how much is spent on those items or how much volume or weight you purchased. And based on these descriptions, the AI is going to give you recommendations on which emission factor it should use, given these descriptions, as well as given the fact that you have this in USD or in dollar amount. So right now, if I go into recalculate, it's going to say that the AI thinks of this as a jet engine used in commercial aircrafts. And the exact match for this, based on its emission factor search, is aircraft engine and engine parts. And so you can see that we've chosen to use this emission factor. In terms of emission factor databases, we tap into so many. So for spend-based calculations, we use the NAICS database, as well as Exiobase. And then for mass-based, for activity-based emissions, we use DEFRA, as well as EcoInvent emission factor libraries. So after you've used AI to calculate your emissions from a baseline level, in the summary page, you'll be able to see all of your items that you've purchased, who the supplier is, what the total value of that purchase was, and then what the estimated emission is. Now you'll see here, though, that the supplier-based emissions are blank, meaning that I need to get information from my supplier to fill out this emissions information. And that's where the supplier portal comes in. But before we go there, I'm going to show you quickly some visualizations of the emissions data. So in here, you'll be able to see your total Scope 3 Category 1 emissions, how much you're spending on Category 1, and then what percentage of your Scope 3 emissions are allocated to Category 1. And down here, you'll also see the emissions broken down by the different items. So you'll be able to see that semiconductors, for example, are the biggest part of your emissions footprint today. You'll also see a tracking progress up here. This tracking progress refers to what percentage of your products you've actually found the emission factor for. So you'll see here some of these are still in calculate states, meaning that we haven't identified the emission factor to be used for these products. And so the goal is to hit 100%, so you have all of your emissions accounted for. Where does this data come from? It can come from two ways. One is it can come from an Excel upload of your data, or two, it can come from an API integration with your purchasing systems. So all of this information exists in your purchasing system somewhere today, so we can get that information into our platform. Great. I'm going to now then move over to our supplier side of the house. So let's say that I am purchasing airplane engine parts from a supplier and I want to understand better what their product footprint is. This is where the supplier portal comes into play. So I'm going to pull up the supplier portal. The supplier portal is going to look immediately very different. So here you'll see that the coloring is now all suddenly in red. It's no longer in Tracera's colors of shades of green. And the reason being is we want the supplier portal to read like your portal. So when your suppliers log in, suppliers don't know who Tracera is. They don't care, but they know who you are. So this portal is going to be branded in your logo, in your colors, so that it's your platform. And from the supplier portal, the suppliers can do a few things. One, as I mentioned, is they can add in the product emissions information. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But they can also add in their ratings. And the benefit is if these ratings are publicly available, so that, MSCI or CDP ratings are usually publicly available, then those ratings will already be pre-populated on our platform. So you'll be able to see that they have a EcoVadis rating or MSCI rating. And if you have suppliers that are very complex and they have multiple subsidiaries that you're working with, you can also handle that in our platform as well. So given we work with really big companies that also have really big suppliers, we've been able to identify a lot of edge cases around how the suppliers and the companies interact with each other. So for example, if you have multiple legal entities and those legal entities all work with the same supplier, but with different arms of the supplier, we're able to handle all of those edge cases as well. You can also manage your code of conduct from our platform. So the code of conduct, there's two ways to look at it. One is you can have the supplier sign your code of conduct. So here, if I go into this, they can download the code of conduct template from here, and they can upload. Let's say I'm uploading for global. And they can add in the code of conduct that they filled out. Once they've added it in to the platform, then it's going to ask you to sign a signature. So that's one option for the suppliers. The other option is for them to add in their own code of conduct. So let's say that there is a number of subsidiaries that are part of it, and they, like your supplier has their own code of conduct and they want to just give that to you. They can do so as well. And in that case, it will actually show up like this in terms of awaiting approval. So here, this means that you will have to approve their code of conduct and have it added to the system. What are some other things you can do here? I mentioned that we can add in EPD or product footprint information. So product footprint information typically is available in a PDF file like this on the left. So we'll wait for this to load. And the PDF file has a number of complicated tables that have emissions related information. So here you'll see that these are all the information that the PDF file has. And global warming potential is really the value that you would care about. So I'm going to go in here and do view in PDF. And it's going to take you to the exact page of the PDF file that it extracted from. Try that again. Perfect. So it's saying, look, I extracted from here. And I'm going to zoom in so you can compare the values. And here you have 6.58, 6.58, 4.58, 4.58. So all of this information has automatically been extracted by AI. The values in red specifically are the values that we care the most about. So we always want to make sure that the red values are populated. And now that we have this global warming potential value for this product, I can use that in our scope 3 calculation so that instead of using a general estimation, I can use the specific values instead. In terms of adding in EPD information, you'll be able to also search it in here for specific products and have the different things filtered for this particular ceramic. You can also add it in a bulk manner. So if I want to search for products using vendor item ID or product ID, let's say I'm searching for things here, and I know the product ID that I'm using, then I can just search for things and add in the products this way instead. So it's an easier way to manage the process. Finally, on the supplier portal, we also obviously have a resources page. So if the suppliers want to learn more about the initiative or the portal, they can get in contact with us, or they can also submit questions. And this is something that we can also help you with as well. Supplier engagement, supplier management, it's a huge lift on your team as well as your procurement teams. So if you want to be funneling some of those questions over to us, we can also help you manage that as a service. And the suppliers can also manage users as well. So if they want to add in other collaborators into the platform, they have unlimited number of users they can add in. And so they can essentially be like, oh, I need an analyst to take a look at this. They can add in other users in the platform themselves as well. All right, we'll see if there's any questions that has come up. What are we reporting under the audit logs tab? Okay, so maybe I can go back to show you guys the audit logs in a second. But also, this concludes all of the modules that I wanted to demo to you today. So if you want to stick around and ask more questions, and I can show you different parts of the platform again to make sure that I'm capturing all of your questions. I think one question was around the audit logs, so I'm just gonna pull that up again. All right, so let me share my screen and go to the compliance module again. So under the compliance module, the audit log is available on the right-hand side like this. So let's say I add in information here, changing information, and I hit save. Then I'm going to go into the audit log on the right-hand side here and hit refresh. You'll be able to see in this question that I made this change. The other part that I would like to show you guys is also for CDP. So CDP, as I'm sure you know, has a distinct question and answer framework. So I'm going to start this new CDP framework. All you need to do to start it is add in what due date you want to have. I'm going to continue. And now it's going to load up the CDP environment. And the CDP environment is organized according to the questions in the framework. And the really cool thing is if I go into a particular question for CDP, it's going to have the detailed drop-down options that you need for reporting. So I'm going to pull up an example where the values are actually populated so you get a better sense for what this looks like. I'm sure you all know that the newest CDP has actually been announced. So we have the latest CDP 2025 already on our platform, which is very exciting. I'll show you how that looks right here. So CDP 2025 is available. I'm going to go in here. And for each of the questions, let's say for business strategy, I have some questions already answered. And the way that it works is you'll be able to see the different drop downs of, let's say, I'm going to report on climate change. No, but we plan to in the next 2 years, more than once a year, adding info, and you'll be able to save this. And also when you're working on CDP 2025, you'll also see your answers in CDP 2024 and make sure that you're aligning your answers to what you did last year. And this is a really cool feature that helps companies really speed up their process in terms of reporting. So I think it's great that our customers are using the platform for not just, general frameworks like GRI, but they can use it for more specific frameworks that have these drop-down options like CDP. Great. Any other questions? Let me take a look at the Q&A list. Maybe I can also show you quickly the users page. I think there are some questions around that. So here is where you can manage your users. The user management is simply done via first name, last name, and then email, and that's how you can send out the invitations. The types of roles that we have on our platform, you have your admin, then you have your data providers for the different topics. Then you have just a general data provider, and those people you can assign to specific questions. So they only see those questions. You also have data reviewers, you have auditors, and then you can also have guests on the platform if needed. Those are usually external providers. And it's very easy for you to send invitations in our platform. You can also manage the roles here. So if I need to edit the roles in the platform, then I can do so like this easily. I can also edit first name, last name, etc. as needed. Great. I think those were all the questions. And so with that, I will kind of give you a recap of everything we talked about and then wrap up the demo. So we started off with our compliance platform, where we talked about how we can use AI to automate the narrative questions. And so that's where we looked to see how we created a embedding of just of your documents, and we use that to answer your narrative questions. Then we talked about social data points and how we can integrate with systems like Workday to pull in the social data automatically into the platform. Then we talked about your greenhouse gas emissions and how we're using AI again to calculate scopes 1 and 2 emissions from your bills and then scope 3 emissions from your purchasing systems. And then lastly, we talked about the supplier portal where we're engaging the suppliers to collect better emissions information. So I think with that holistic product suite, you'll be able to really improve your sustainability reporting and data collection. And then once you have that solid data foundation, then the future is we're going to be able to start querying that data. So you can start asking questions to the data like, what will happen if I changed my gas from LPG to natural gas? What's going to happen if I change my fleet to all diesel to an electric fleet? What's going to happen if I change my supplier A to supplier B? Those are the types of questions that we hope to be able to answer once all of your data is in our platform. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to engaging with you further.